My name is Tongji Philip Qian.
Okay. And I didn't say who I was. I'm Jonathan Weinberg, and we're here to do yet another portrait. And today is April 11th, 2022, and yet another experiment. Why don't you say a little bit of who you are, maybe how we met, I don't know, I can talk about that too.
Cool. I am Phil, I'm an artist. I teach as well, and I met Jonathan in 2019, I think, in the spring at Rhode Island School of Design.
Ah.
And at that time I was a student in the printmaking department, and Jonathan was a critic with the graduate students at that time.
Yes, and we immediately became, I think, more than students, friends, because Phil is a brilliant person. He's a very good artist, and he's a very smart guy, and we had really interesting discussions about sort of the nature of art and also very subtle issues about what does it mean to not just not just how does a particular picture look, but what are the implications of whether, let's say, you have a print and you frame it, or how you frame it, or how you hang it, and if you hang it in a grid or you don't hang it in a grid, all these things that often people think of as not important, or they don't think about it until the last minute, right? Until after they've made the image, but are actually really important to the way we think about the image, right?
Definitely, and that's some of the concerns we always bring up in the printmaking department. So that might be the context of where we were at that time as well.
Yes. So how did you get to one of the things that seems to be an ongoing theme already in this series of portraits is sort of how does somebody get to be an artist? Where did they come from? Talk a little bit about your history, like
Great.
where you were born, all that kind of stuff.
Great. So I was born in Shanghai, in China, and I've always drawn when I was a kid. And the beginning of me starting to draw was because we moved into a new apartment complex, and my mother realized that her middle school art teacher happened to be living in the same place. So I was immediately enrolled in the in the drawing classes on the weekends with the teacher who was a female, and her husband taught in a university in Shanghai. So he would sometimes also come to speak to the student groups at that time.
Wait, so how old were you?
I was probably in my teens, but maybe 12 to 13, and I did that until maybe 10 to 12, and I did that until the beginning of high school, where I went to boarding school.
So it's funny because it's all about me. No, but I really started to make art when I started going to this camp. But then when I came back, there was a wonderful woman at something called Greenwich House Pottery, and then once a week I would go to these little classes. So was this once a week, or?
It's once. It would be like an afternoon a weekend. And sometimes I went twice, on both Saturday and Sundays, but most of the time once a week. And of course, in the summer or during winter break, I would go more often.
And was this drawing?
Yeah, observational drawing.
Okay.
Yeah. So we would draw, the basic still lifes, and sometimes observational drawings from the balcony. So that I guess that would be called life drawings.
Oh, so it's interesting. You didn't go out and about. You would be like looking.
Yeah, because the teacher will have to take care of maybe 5 to 6 kids. I mean, it would be more difficult to go to a park together.
Right.
Because we might disappear. We're very good at that. Yeah, so that was kind of the beginning of me showing an interest in the arts. And I have no idea about contemporary at that time. And but there was one exhibition in Shanghai that was really, I think, significant to me. So I think there were a large group of paintings by Manet, which traveled to Shanghai maybe in the late 90s or early 2000s. And it was in a state-sponsored exhibition hall, Shanghai Museum. And then a lot of people went. We, of course, at that time had no information. I had no information about who the artist was and what Impressionism was. It was very early, before contemporary was kind of given green light in China. And that exhibition, I would say, etched an impression in my mind until I was a student in Minnesota in a very small liberal arts college, and I went to the Art Institute of Chicago, and everything came back.
So just because I'm curious about this, so when you say that you didn't know about Manet, but however, was it kind of social realism that you knew? What was the kind of, what we call social realism? Was it traditional? I may be using the wrong term. Was it traditional Chinese art? What would it be that you would have known?
I would say going to exhibition was not a habit at that time for a lot of
So you weren't going to exhibition
at all,
but wouldn't she show you like in class, like what kind of art would she show? Wouldn't she show you art or no?
She would show works of still lifes, charcoal or pencil drawings.
Right, but by
No
Chinese
paintings.
artists though.
By her and her groups.
By just her and her groups,
yeah.
not
So we did not. There was not a historical component.
not a historical component
Yeah,
at all. That's interesting. Okay.
And of course, the people would claim that Chinese at that time would be closer to social realism by the Soviet Union.
Right.
By the artists from that. But I don't have a very exact recollection of seeing these things at all.
Right.
Except for maybe for the drawings or paintings of farmers in Siberia, maybe.
Huh.
So that would be a picture that might ring a bell, but not. I wouldn't say it could be a generalization I'm comfortable with claiming.
Huh. Well, I mean, it's interesting because like when you think about it, like when I'm, I know that I was talking about this in the other video. I know that I was taken to museums very young. My mother's best friend was a psychiatrist, and I loved Van Gogh and everything. But I can't. It's sort of interesting. You don't know when's the first time that you ever looked at a serious painting, or you don't. It's very hard to know that. You just sort of. When you're a kid, right?
Yeah, for me, it's a definitive moment, I think.
Okay, well, tell me.
The Manet exhibition.
Oh, the Manet.
Yes,
so
yes,
it
yes.
is seeing Manet.
Yes.
Interesting. Because in an interesting way, in certain contexts, Manet might look conservative to somebody today, but he's a kind of really interesting artist because he's both conservative and radical.
I mean, he didn't. I think the peculiar thing about the exhibition was that he didn't really come with his contemporaries. He came by himself.
Right.
The paintings. So as I said, the context was difficult for me to look at. Not that if there were a context, I would have been critical enough to realize that. Just to contextualize this, that museum or exhibition hall will show, old Chinese paintings from the Song dynasties.
Right.
And I think they had a loan in the late 90s with a museum in Egypt. So there was a lot of pyramid and mummy situations which did come to China at that time.
Right, which was all the rage at that time.
Of
right?
course.
Right, all over the world. I don't remember why that was, but anyway, people were all King Tut and everything. It's like very...
Of course, definitely, definitely.
Right.
That was a trend.
Right. Interesting that was happening all over the place. So was it, again, I'm going on about Manet, but was it all... was it later Manet or the whole shebang?
I don't remember exactly, but there was
remember.
one painting. It was a little boy with the flute. I think that's you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. That's
the
very
painting,
early,
I guess.
Very kind of in that kind of where he's looking at Goya and sort of looking at Spanish painting, Velasquez and things like that. I mean, I always say this about, and I may be wrong. I'm not an expert on Manet, but I always think that one of the things that Manet did is I identify Manet because he was an incredible flower painter. I paint flowers a lot, and I think flowers. He often uses flowers in his paintings to signal to his audience that he knows how to paint. Like he can paint flowers superbly, and then they'll be in the same picture with some areas that are very unfinished or very radical. Because that's one of the things that people, I think, gets lost in the history of art. We think of avant-garde artists and radical artists and how cool that is. But we forget that often to the viewer at a particular time, it doesn't seem like it's radical. It may seem purely incompetent, And, the best example of that is Le Demoiselle d'Avignon by Picasso. And Picasso and his friends were like, "What are you joking?" When they first saw that,
Certainly.
they didn't know what it was, and he rolled it up and didn't look at it for a long period of time because he thought it was kind of a mess, right? Or that risk of doing something that is so new that it looks completely wrong. is something we tend not to think about, because once we look at it in art history, it's so famous, you know, even Duchamp's fountain, you know, is a urinal, and like, oh my God, you know, it's in a museum, it's behind a case and everything, and we forget that kind of moment. So it's kind of interesting, like, to me, that's why I'm sort of obsessed with this, like, what would it be like for the first time to see a Manet show, and you have no context out of which to
There was definitely no context, but people were fervent followers.
Yeah.
Because we realized it's at that time we would think contemporary art still was in France, and that would be before my own generation. But I think that for the first generations of artists, Chinese artists who arrived in this country in the late '80s or mid '80s, they had doubts about whether they would be able to find contemporary art here, because there was just a significant lack of information in China at that time. And people all thought if you want to study art in the West, you will go to France. So funding was very abundant to study in France, but not much in this country.
I see. Okay, so go on, instead of me talking. You next step, what you said you went to boarding school?
I went to boarding school, and then of course
Was that in China or?
In China, yes.
Okay.
And then the interest in art disappeared because I had to worry about academics, and I had to every day I would have a pretty cutthroat schedule. So I would wake up every day at 5:45, and then the school will be ongoing until about 10 o'clock at night.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, and every day in the morning.
But you lived there.
I lived there, yes.
Yeah.
So every day in the morning, we would run 400 meters from 6:25 to 6:35.
Oh my goodness.
Even if it was in the winter. That's a very fond memory I have. So it's not something I lament I did do. I enjoyed that experience significantly. I thought that's a collective experience you will never be able to live again.
So were your parents okay with you? I mean, obviously they sent you to that art class, but what did they think about it? Well, that's later, but you know, about the idea of you becoming an artist, or
I mean, when they sent me to these weekend classes, it was because they wanted to encourage me to have a hobby.
I see. Not thinking that you were going to end up
being an artist. And of course, when I studied art history in college, and they supported me. Yeah. They supported my decision to study art history, and I think that exhibition for them was a first timer as well. And I.
All right. So then what happened?
And I played a very peculiar sport when I was growing up. It's called ultimate Frisbee.
Oh yeah.
And I played this sport, and I founded actually the first high school team in Shanghai.
Ah.
And I was playing on the Shanghai team. We traveled extensively, so I was. I think at the time I was quite good, and I had the potential.
Wait. So how did you come to that sport?
Someone introduced me to the sport.
Oh.
Yeah, and I enjoyed it. I enjoy the camaraderie a lot, and I think that this is a sport that's very new in China in the 2000s, and I think now it's getting very popular.
Ah, still?
Yeah,
it's
getting very big
I
at the
remember
moment.
when it sort of took off, but I didn't.
I decided I will want to study in this country,
Okay.
and then I will want to choose a setting where I could play ultimate Frisbee on the team.
Oh, okay.
So I went to Small Liberals College in Minnesota.
I love this. So I did not know this about you. So what
Yeah.
was the key thing for you? Wasn't some idea about America and
No,
art and contemporary art? It was
sport.
ultimate
It was sport,
Frisbee.
yes.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and one of the team captains at the time went to the school, and he recommended the school. I wasn't initially interested.
And what was that school called?
Carleton College.
Oh, Carleton. Yeah, it's very well known. Very good ratio of teachers to students.
Very, very good.
Right.
Very
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
So I was really interested in making a team, and our team would win national championships.
Goodness.
And we are a school of about 2,000 people.
So you started the team at Carleton? Or?
No, I once I got there, I thought it's not the environment I would really enjoy.
Right.
Because people are very competitive, which is fine. I can.
So you gave it up afterwards?
I gave it up. I gave it up after 2 years.
Okay.
But I always had a lot of fun. For example, some of our best players will represent the United States for the 2010 World Championship in Prague. In Czech Republic, but I actually represented a club team in China.
Ah.
So they were surprised that I was also there, but I enjoyed the experience. But I injured myself the first day, so I just hung out for the rest of the time.
Oh. Have you ever made art about Frisbees?
No, but I think that Frisbee was a transcultural device for me.
Uh-huh.
And that's something I feel very comfortable talking about, at least in the past decade or something. And of course, I retired retired might not be the right word, but I stopped playing Frisbee in 2012, and that's when I wanted to understand what I want to do with my life.
Uh-huh. So you were how old about?
I was in my early 20s. I was in college.
Okay. All right. So you weren't thinking, oh, I really should become a doctor or a lawyer or anything like that?
No, in college I was interested in being an architect.
Okay.
And I studied a lot on architecture history, post-war architecture history in Europe.
Oh, you know what I forgot to ask you? So what do your parents do?
My parents teach in universities.
Oh, okay.
And
What field?
my mom teaches law. My dad, teaches something like management.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, so in college I didn't study art. I
Yeah.
didn't study too much. I took one class first year and one class last year, and the last class I took was printmaking.
Right.
And so that was something. That was a very crucial moment.
But you were also doing art history, right?
I mean, to graduate with an art history degree, we have to take 2 art classes.
Okay.
And these are the 2 art classes. One is observational drawing. The other one is, introductory printmaking.
Wait, so you were majoring as an art history?
Yes,
But you
yes.
had to take some art classes?
Yes,
Right.
because in a smaller arts college,
Right.
it's one department, art and art history.
Any particular teacher in art history that stood out that you...
Well, it's a very small school. So I took a lot of classes on Chinese art, what it means for the Ming Dynasty Chinese scholars to be living in the wilderness and doing calligraphy or playing music or painting, with ink on silk and things like that. And I think that contemporary art was always something I'm very intrigued by, and that was also the reason why I wrote my, thesis on contemporary architecture in the late 80s in Berlin.
In Berlin? Oh, how unusual.
Specifically in the case of the Jewish memorial with Peter Eisenman and Richard Serra.
Oh. So, and had you gone to Berlin?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I studied abroad in Berlin many times, and it remains one of my favorite places.
Oh. So this is happening, did you take like a semester off and do school in Europe?
When I was in high school, I had an exchange year in Germany, but not in Berlin. It would be in the middle of the country. Oh. And so I spent 1 year there. And when I was in college, I studied abroad with a program. I didn't have to take any time off.
So it sounds like you had like a superb education.
I would believe so.
Yeah. No. Interesting. Huh.
So the last class I took was the art class, and that's a class that inspired me to become an artist. Of course, an intention to be an architect is still lingering, and right after college, I moved back to China, but to rural China, to become a teacher for 2 years with a fellowship.
Oh.
And then it was there that I taught my students Saul Lewitt's conceptualism.
Huh. What did they think of that?
They remember me as the teacher who made them draw math in art classes. And I say that I really enjoyed my experience.
Uh-huh. Okay, so continue your life story.
And so when I was teaching, of course, I had a lot of time. On a Buddhist mountain. It happened to be a Buddhist mountain. I didn't choose to live on a Buddhist mountain.
Oh, well, tell me what is a Buddhist mountain?
So it's a mountain where the programs would try to visit on an annual basis.
Oh.
So they try to climb up. It's about how tall is that mountain? 3,300 meters.
Wow.
Because of the geographical location of that mountain, it's a combination between what we call Han Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism.
Okay.
And they honor different gods.
No, of course. Or teachers too, really, right? Yes.
if
So
you live there.
what were you there to, besides solid, what were you there to teach? I mean, what were you teaching?
Observational drawing.
Observational drawing.
Basic drawing skills.
I see.
I mean, that's not something I'm really interested in teaching, but I was the first arts teacher in that school.
Ah.
And that's because it's in a rural setting, so kids from the first grade to the ninth grade will be in one school.
It's funny because I've seen all the work that I've seen you do, of course, has been various forms of conceptualism and abstraction. But I suspect that from what you've said that you probably are quite a good observational drawer.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's something that continues to interest me.
No, that could be true, but I wonder if you're good at it.
We'll see.
It's taking our time to get you to the present moment. So let's come back
Fast
to
forward.
you. So you were doing art history, but then you started doing printmaking, and then you went to graduate school first, or did you go right to RISD, or what happened?
After that, I took about 5 years off.
Okay.
And during that moment, I was working. I had a job. I taught weekend classes in both art history and art,
And where was this?
in Shanghai.
Ah, cool.
And then I spent a lot of time in my apartment, where which also functions as a studio.
Okay.
And
What kind of art were you making?
I was making prints. I was exceptionally dedicated to the medium of printmaking, because I think I can cancel. I believed at that time I could cancel my ego with the indirect medium. And
Okay, so go into tell us about that.
I was really interested in the element of chance, because I think the subject matter can be determined by. I wouldn't go as far as to state this is nature, but I think it can have an instruction or rule-based content, which I can only realize the form but not the final image before execution. So I was really interested in that, and I thought prints are perfect because they're kind of vicarious. I'm not directly making a mark on the final object, or whatever that might be, or whatever that might entail. And I did that for probably 3 to 5 years, and I exhibited in a few places.
So you know what we missed in your story, because you sort of went from I don't know anything about contemporary art to talking about some of these classes, but then you never sort of taught how did the contemporary art get? Obviously, you mentioned Solid Whip, but it's obviously contemporary art. Hit you with a bag at some point there, right? Where did that happen? Berlin? Or?
When I was teaching in rural China, when I was really interested in reading about minimalism and conceptualism.
Okay.
So I spent a lot of time. If I'm not drawing, I will be reading, and I think I read a lot, and it was because of the readings which inspired me to try to become an artist.
Okay, so what I guess what I'm trying to say is because I could tell you I took this class or I saw this painting or something and it had this. And this is what I want to do. You must have had some kind of encounter with contemporary art, which is suddenly, Duchamp or something. When was that? And was there some moment or a teacher or something that suddenly said, "Oh, I'm not going to be interested in. I'm no longer interested in realism, as they say, or illusionistic art, or what do you call it? Or even drawing what you see. But I'm suddenly going to be interested in post." Or conceptualism. I'm going to suddenly the art that most interests me is not abstract expressionism. It's not. It's going to be right. It's forms of sort of thinking art, right?
I think to answer your question, I think the person who really inspired me is Lewitt.
Okay.
And I think when I looked at him in academic settings, I wasn't really aware of his work in situ. So I've never really seen any Lewitt until 2014.
Okay.
But when I was teaching, I realized that conceptualism had a lot of potential to be global, because my students understood what Lewitt was trying to do. They understood there could be a bridge between art and math, which is something that's very difficult to argue for my students at the time, because none of them showed a lot of interest in either subjects.
Okay.
And just to mix that with a little bit more of, I guess, art that has happened in Asia. It was the minimalists who first went to Japan in the 70s for the Tokyo Biennale, and they represented contemporary art at that time, post-war. And I think we talked about this. I'm not. I don't know if I'm a propagandist for global conceptual art, but I think that I was very convinced at that time that Saul's instructions are clear to people from different backgrounds. People might find it people might find it compelling. People might find them to be basic or mundane or irrelevant. But I think people understood what ultimately he was trying to do.
So explain this more to me. I mean, seriously, because I see how the instructions would be clear, but I don't understand why. But why is that significant? I mean, you could have instructions on how to build a building or how to play a piece of music. Why? And those are perfectly clear to people across cultures, right? Music, for example, would be a good example of that, right? Right. You know, so you have a piece of music that you want somebody to play, and an orchestra in Japan and an orchestra in the United States are all going to be able to play that, you know, reasonably similarly, right?
But they will be considered experts in the field. The people who can read music.
I see.
But I will be speaking of people who never encountered art before.
I see. So this is that these instructions are
they had
easy,
no
that
problem.
anybody could do it.
Yeah, or they had no problem relating to the intersection between math and art for Saul's instructions.
Okay.
For his wall drawings more specifically.
Right.
And I mean, I think his writings are I wouldn't say confusing or ambiguous,
Right.
or vague, but I think I admired his work. Also, possibly because he's started his career as an intern in I.M. Pei's architecture firm as a graphic designer. I mean, I.M. Pei is a name that's known to a lot of. I mean, almost every Chinese family. So that's.
So you know, it's interesting that, and he worked for your I.M. Pei, or just a different.
He worked for I.M. Pei, yes.
I didn't know that.
When he was much younger, and then I don't know if it was before Syracuse or after Syracuse. You know.
So it's interesting that Vito Acconci ended up becoming an architect. He left performance art and his conceptualism, and at the end of his life, he did architecture practice. Did you know about that?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. All right. Anyway, okay.
So that opened the door to conceptualism, and in 2014 I was in New York, and then I went to Deer Beacon. So that was the chapel for minimalism in a way.
Surely,
and,
yes.
And
also Donald Judd and
certainly.
Yes, yeah.
And that was, I think, the first time I saw Lewitt wall drawings, and at that time they wouldn't allow pictures. So I enjoyed my visit, I would say, quite profoundly, and I found the work to be very convincing. Almost everybody at that time in the museum. I mean, the allure is that that's a moment I did not live myself, and there's a kind of a curiousness to my understanding with these people.
Okay, and then, and so what kind of art are you making? And you're making art in the same mode. How are you processing that?
Well, at that time, after my visit to Deer Beacon, in 2014, my art will be more closely aligned with aesthetics of minimalism, and that assisted me to produce work for about 3 to 4 years.
So one thing you're conflating. Well, I don't want to say conflating. That sounds so negative. But it's interesting that you know, a lot of people see Lewitt, and in some ways, like interesting parallel with Chuck Close, that he actually is somebody who kind of bridges or crosses the line. That he's not a minimalist, actually. They see him, but he's not just a conceptualist, or he's a conceptualist who ends up making art that looks like minimalism, but isn't really the same. You know, of course, and the question is, how does one categorize?
I mean, I'm using that term
things?
very
Yes.
casually.
Yes.
If I write about it, I will probably put it in quotes or something like that.
Oh, interesting.
It's not, these movements, I will be talking about the movements commonly associated with minimalism, conceptualism, and post-minimalism, something like that. And I don't have an opinion whether I should categorize Solo as a conceptualist or a minimalist. I don't.
Because if you
have
take
an
somebody like Tony Smith, for example, whose work Tony Smith's work has a kind of expression, well, at least the way he talks about it, it has this, it's the next stage to abstract expressionism. It has a kind of, deathly, expressionistic quality, while, that's very different from Sol Lewitt. It's not so much about a series, it's a series. In fact, it almost seems like, the end of a series, right?
Yes,
There is no series, it's the last. One of the things that I used to talk about is this sort of desire of artists to make the last thing, right? Either you make the first thing or you make the last thing. As long as you're the last, it's okay.
Of course, you want to be the concluding chapter.
There's that quality in. I was going to say there's a quality of that in of Tony Smith, of sort of of a kind of end. While I think that's why people, one of the reasons that Sol Lewitt doesn't seem to be about that, there's a kind of
continuity or generosity.
But generosity, and then there's also a kind of sense, well, this series can open up to a whole range of possibilities. So there can be. Just as he does that photographic series, where he goes around looking at manholes, going all over, so that there's a kind of opening of the world. This isn't a kind of closing down of connections to the world out there. That actually, this is a possibility of all kinds of ranges of art making.
I think his later wall drawing instructions offered a lot more autonomy to the draftspeople than the beginning ones, than the ones in the 70s. I mean, I think when he says make 10,000 lines on the wall in a grid, you can. There is some curiosity that can occur there. Whereas if you talk about I'm going to map a quadrangle on the wall, it's going to be the same. The only changing element in it is the size of the wall, which I think was what he wanted at that time.
I meant more, that's interesting. I was thinking more that the very act, so to do a series of things that seems repetitive and potentially even inane, right? And that's in Vito Acconci, can actually open up a kind of a whole range of possibilities for other people to do other series of actions and performances, and that those actions and series that may seem meaningless actually can take on all kinds of meanings because they relate to the meaningless repetitions of our lives, that we do the same thing over and over again.
It's like very small books.
Right. Or, we unhappiness is often based on the things that we do over and over again. But have a certain comfort also, because why do we do that? Why do we, or why, I know that the thing that I should be doing the most is painting, and I'll do, anything maybe for a whole week, not paint. Why, or, I know that I should go to the gym instead of watching television. They're all, repetition runs our lives, right? So there are ways in which an art of repetition, of series, can be powerfully eloquent, actually, about all aspects, of the things that we do. And it's not a closing down, perhaps. On the other hand, Vito Acconci is an artist that I know a lot more than I do Sol Lewitt. There is also, in Vito Acconci, this sort of death instinct idea, Freud's sort of idea that we do these things in a repetitious way, and that's sort of the human being sort of almost going back towards the most darkest aspect of who we are. It's this repetition, a kind of pointlessness to masturbatory pointlessness to the things that we do. So all these things are built in. It seems to me they're built into a lot of the art making of the late 20th century, which is often about the negative, the darkness of experience, right? Of how, how is it that we have a Holocaust? How is it that we do these terrible things in an interesting way? Why do we create so much unhappiness in a sense? Now that seems far removed from Saul Lewitt, but
No, but I mean, if you talk about the Holocaust, right in front of the Jewish Memorial in Berlin is the American Embassy, and it's Saul Lewitt's work that greets visitors, and I mean, he stars.
So what does that? So what does that mean exactly?
That there is I mean, he is an American Jewish artist.
Yes,
and,
yes.
And this is not a strictly American situation.
Yes.
I mean, his work exists very eloquently on an international platform with very charged political situations and context.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's the part that makes me dubious, I guess, because why? One of the things that I see is that Saul Lewitt is everywhere right now. He's in every institution, every the embassy, the American Embassy,
Definitely.
every museum has a Saul Lewitt now. Yale,
Huge
Athenaeum,
commitment, yes.
every the Benton Museum at UConn. He's a Connecticut artist, but still, and also he's generous, right? Very generous, and also it's a wonderful thing to teach students because you can get the students to do it. So it's all good, but it also means that it gets along well with power. This is not art that is gonna get anybody upset. Except for maybe somebody like somebody like
Paul,
me
you
who
mean
paints
like
portraits. Somebody who wants to paint portraits and flowers.
No.
Right?
What do you mean by you mean like the art is seemingly neutral? Is that what you mean?
Well, this is a problem with a lot of abstract art. It gets along well with it's lobby art. It goes well in lobby. It gets along. It's polite. It doesn't. Nobody is going to
challenge it on site or something.
Well, it's not going to. It doesn't create any stir. It doesn't. It's not. It's as I say. It's institutional. It's institutional art. It's become, or it has become institutional art. It hasn't.
You mean the taste is already established?
Yeah.
To appreciate it.
Yeah, and it's pretty too. It also is very elegant. It's not. He could say I don't know if he did ever do that kind of work, but he could say, take brown paint and hurl it on the wall, and then take green paint and hurl that on the wall, and then take a bowl of shit and smear it. You know what I mean? In other words, right. He's not. The result of a Saul Lewitt art is something
Beautiful.
that looks like an elegant, minimalist painting.
Definitely.
Right, and that's right. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying
Of course.
that
there exists a different strategy.
Right. Well, yeah. It's he's not in the it's not like Duchamp's urinal in that sense. But then again, even Duchamp's urinal gets along with power, right? Even
Definitely.
that gets into the Museum of Modern Art because museums are and institutions are very good at sort of
Absorbing such dilemmas.
so-called subversive art practices. So anyway, sorry.
Sorry for what? You're good.
Yeah. So let's move on from Saul Lewitt. So you decide to go to Frisbee? Are we at that point?
Yeah, we can go there. Yeah,
Okay.
so I decided to go to.
You like printmaking? No, you were making prints.
Yeah, and I believe in the medium because of how portable it can be, and how it can. Again, I'm really preoccupied with the kind of international relevance kind of situation. How works can be read by people, can reach people, stuff like that. I wouldn't say it necessarily had a community aspect, but I think because of the fact that prints can have multiples, it can travel more readily on an international level.
And are you doing like shows in different places and bringing them to demonstrate that traveling?
What do you mean?
Well, like Well, in the most obvious way, I remember when Cockney did these shows where he would fax he did fax prints. So like he had a simultaneous show in like 5 different galleries all over the world by faxing prints.
Not like that at the
No.
moment, but
But I mean, that would be an example of that kind of thing. I mean, were you interested in like demonstrating the way that prints travel?
not at the moment anymore.
No, not now, but then. I went back then.
No, because I would think that would be too pedagogical. I didn't
I
have
see.
to prove it.
It's just built into the way prints are.
Yeah, but there is some room for argument there, I think, because I wouldn't say prints exist in the peripheral spaces, but I think that I'm not sure if there's a relation between prints and paintings in general.
Well, also, this is a thing that sometimes happens with people who work in photography, is that when you're talking about photography, you're talking about an entire series of apparatus, your whole realm of procedures, right? And art photography is just a tiny little bit of it, right? So printing is like that, right? Art prints are just this tiny little thing of the nature of printing. Right? So when you say print medium, do you mean
Anything
art
that can
print
be
or
anything that can be reproduced.
Right.
Anything. So when I'm talking about it now, it probably has an emphasis on the arts.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be. That's not the. It doesn't have to be the whole conversation.
Right. So I guess I'm trying to ask concretely, what is your work at this time when we're talking about looking like? Like, what are you making?
At the moment.
No, back then.
Back then.
But we can talk now about what you're doing now.
So at the moment, at that time, that time, I chose to I was interested in getting an MFA because I'm interested in contemporary art, and I think I'm very, before I came to RISD, I was very comfortable in making works and getting exhibitions and doing things. But I think I am getting tired of that because I think my instructions are good, are good enough for me, and I do not feel challenged with my practice, and it becomes a routine.
Okay, so what was that practice though?
I would design instruction-based prints.
Okay.
So I function both as the provider for instructions, the craftsperson to make the work, and the printer.
I see. So instead of having somebody else do it,
Correct.
So there would be a series of instructions, and then you would make a print based on those instructions. So in a sense, it was following the Lewitt notion,
absolutely.
where you have an experiment. You're supposed to see the experiment through.
Yes, correct.
Right.
Without making aesthetic choices or adjustments.
Right.
But obviously, because of the design, they turned out elegant or beautiful because there's no other alternative. I mean, there's nothing to compare it with because of my commitment to the element of chance.
Well, why is that?
Because
why would it necessarily come out elegant and beautiful?
Because as I design my algorithm, I make sure I don't know the final outcome, but I can predict what it could look like.
Okay.
And when I talk about the element of chance with me at that time, I use a dice, so I know there are only 6 outcomes of, let's say, making a line, and making a line on the wood block, and I will be making wood block prints. So I know the final outcome will be an accumulation of lines. And because of my design of the algorithm, I know that they will not look very scarce. So the quantity will make sure the image has a dimension to it. And it's very difficult. I become very accustomed to the process, and at some point, it no longer satisfied me.
Okay.
Because I want to argue for higher dimension of contemporary spin in these works, or in my practice in general. So that was when I decided I would, I will go to RISD. I will be interested in the idea of going to RISD.
Okay.
And when I was at RISD, I did not take any printmaking classes because I only took the classes that seemed to have a contemporary component.
Okay.
So I wasn't interested in taking technical classes because I think they can be taken elsewhere. And at Frisbee, I was interested in understanding the conundrum of theory and also trying to analyze what's going on right now.
Okay. And did that work out?
I'm happy about the 2 years I spent in
okay.
Providence. Yeah,
And then you did a lot of collaborative work, right?
I wouldn't say a lot. I think I'll be a pretty difficult person to collaborate with.
But you did
but
some
I did some collaboration I greatly enjoyed.
Cool. All right. So now what are you doing?
Now I am very interested in my relationship with this country. Yeah, I'm very interested in my my engagement with the American society, both in an urban and a rural setting. And these are the topics that intrigue me at the moment because I think it's getting incredibly difficult to hear each other and to debate.
Yes, that is true.
In this society, and because of our where we live in upstate New York, because of our outsider status, I will be able to speak to a lot of people, whereas some other people might not have the opportunity to do that because they think we're out of their zone in the first place. And I try to
As an expatriate, you have a kind of, it's funny because we talked about Henry James and Sargent, both of those were expatriates.
I have an outsider's edge or something.
Yes.
I mean, I would like to have an outsider edge, but I haven't. Other people see me carrying an outsider's card that they think. I mean, it's a privilege. I love that. I love that label, and I think that label can give me a lot of thoughts.
So, and how's that worked out into actual practice?
So, recently I've been doing a lot of conceptual artist books, and I am really interested. For example, the last one I did is called Questionnaire Reality. So I invited participants to contribute a question they're interested in asking to create a questionnaire. And then I received probably about 15 responses, and then all of the participants were again invited to complete the whole set of questions. And the whole thing is anonymous, although all of them are given credits as a group. So you don't. So it will be. I wouldn't say you wouldn't really know, but it will be very difficult to realize who provided which set of questions. So I think that through the cancellation of.
You mean answers, or they actually came up with the questions?
They both.
Okay.
So each person, if they're willing, they can provide a question, and I don't really know who provided the question either, and then they can come back to provide a set of answers to all the questions, or they cannot do it. It's voluntary. And so I think through the cancellation of identity, we can look at the answers as they are. And some of the answers talked about, race in 2020. Some of them talked about social emotional identity or status through the pandemic, and of course some questions are a little bit more casual. For example, more casual.
So can you give us some examples?
A race-based question that I found to be very crucial to the identity of the questionnaire would be: can Black history be taught by people of other races? And I found some of the answers to be very, very meaningful, and I think that they realize it's a safer space because their identity is not really disclosed, and that's a diversity of opinion situation that I greatly enjoyed. And some other questions, for example, what do you do when you want to take care of yourself? I think that's still a very important question. It's just not a question that has it doesn't seem to have a critical spin, but I do think that's an important question. So I don't edit the questions, and I don't edit the answers as I publish them. And everybody understood.
And where do you publish this?
In my artist book.
Okay, I see.
And
so does this also have an online presence, or is
I have an online presence with there's an interview I did with my partner, and it was funny. So I told her I would like to be interviewed by her because she understood my priority in this project, and because I would speak to her about what I would like to do, and then she would discuss ideas with me. And then eventually I wanted to have a fairly formal conversation with her, because she might be able to push me to go to uncharted water or something like that. I'll be more comfortable entertaining her interests. And we did this on Memorial Weekend 2021. So I also want this conversation to be memorialized. So I mean, joking aside, I did not.
Is she from China also?
Yes.
Okay.
Joking aside, I did not plan this interview with her, so she was free to ask whatever she was interested in, and it's the entire interview is recorded, and that has an online presence.
Cool.
So and the artist book also included a series of drawings, which is something I was really excited about at that time, and now too, and and then it called attention to all the locations where my participants came from. It included locations in China, in Washington D.C., in New York, and in Providence, Rhode Island, among other places.
So, a thing that often seems to come up, would you, about this whole idea of art school, would you recommend that people go to art school? Did you think that it was a good thing for you?
I went to Frisbee as an older artist, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that, to me, I'm really thankful I did that. I'm very thankful I wasn't eager to go to art school right after my undergraduate study. I mean, a lot of people still do that. I mean, I don't think I have a recommendation to offer, but I think going there, in my 30s, I think made me understand what's my what I should be allergic to, and what would be my support system, what would be my immune system at school. So I would be more comfortably choosing what kind of stuff I want to do, and what kind of situations I want to find myself engaged in. And I would be more eager to take some of the support network with me after I graduate. And that's an underlying priority. And I knew about that before I entered. So I will be less interested in academic conversations about the subject matter or skill. I'll be interested in where my work fits in contemporary art. I mean, it sounds very vague, but that's a question of course I still work with. That's a question I still ask myself on a daily basis. But I think my experience at RISD prompted me to continue to entertain that question.